This Choircast podcast episode is brought to you by The Wisdom of Hobbits, by me, Matthew J. DiStefano. In this hopeful yet at times poignant homage, I focus on everyone's favorite halfling friend, the Hobbit. A charming people, this Shire-based race has captivated, enthralled, and enchanted the hearts and minds of millions. And though they're not a religious society, I argue that spiritual truths, love, kindness, generosity, hope, and even compassion can be found within their familiar yet still relevant and didactic tales. Available now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever you get your fine books. From Choir Publishing.
Welcome to the Unbelief Podcast, your journey, actually our journey together beyond inherited beliefs to a spirituality that works for you. I'm your host, Jeremy. I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. We can fix that later, right? No? Damn. Welcome to the Unbelief Podcast. I am Jeremy, and I'm with...
Hi, I am Emily Peck.
And Emily is a super smarty pants at Wesley Theological Seminary. And we're doing something a little different today. Normally I'd be interviewing her, but she's actually going to interview me about digital community. And I thought it would be an interesting conversation for you to listen in on.
Great. I'm also going to add super smarty pants to my business card.
Please do that.
So this is Reverend Jeremy Steele. Would you introduce yourself and tell our Demon students a little bit about you and your ministry?
Sure. So I am institutional wise, I am an elder in the United Methodist Church. I am one of three United Methodist pastors in the denomination who are appointed to a fully digital community. My community is a little different in that we don't have a traditional model. So there's nobody, we're not live streaming somebody with a guitar. There's not a sermon every week. My community is called the Nooma community, Nooma, and it has really four different pieces. So there's my online presence on social media that I'm called the Skeptic Pastor. So I am deeply skeptical person just as a personality trait, which is interesting as a pastor because, I'm not 100% sure whether or not God exists. And so I release videos almost every day on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube that do one of a couple of things. So I will offer a progressive take or clarification on some sort of biblical or theological issue. I will expose corruption in the church and talk about what that means. And I will do videos that help people understand how to choose beliefs that work for them. And that's really what I say that my sort of primary purposes online, that I help people choose beliefs that work for them. And by that I mean beliefs that help them, spiritual beliefs and practices that help them be the best version of themselves, find a purpose greater than themselves, and experience transcendence, whether that's like chill bumps when they are singing a song or just being able to rise above their circumstances. So online, I have like 250,000 followers. I get between 200,000 and 1 million views a week. I'm up over 500,000 this week. I had it partially because I had a video that went semi-viral. It's over 250,000 views. That is answering a question about where Cain's wife came from, and really the fundamental approach to understanding the Genesis accounts. And how those things are written and all of that stuff. So that's one piece. That's sort of the front door. And through that, people will find out about our digital community that's called Not Church. It's called Not Church because somebody said early on that it was like church, in that people are talking about spiritual things, processing ancient texts, sharing memes and pictures of their pets, and also like there for each other in the middle of the night when somebody's got chest pains and is going to the hospital. So they said it's like all the stuff that you want from church, without the judgment and the shame and all of that. Most of the people involved in Not Church have been deeply wounded, traumatized by the church. Most of them, when they come in, say like they will never go back to church, and a lot of them really the Bible or Jesus or all of that is so problematic for them, and it's our fault. Like it's the church's fault. But they want spiritual community. They're still spiritually engaged. And so they join Not Church. And I don't know, it's this really beautiful space. It's very unique in my experience in our modern world. Right? It's got all kinds of people of very different spiritual identities and non-identities. And like, for example, at one point, a guy came in and posted his sort of introduction where he is spiritually, the things that he believes. And I knew that a lot of the things that he was saying, he was from a very different spiritual tradition than several of the people. And so a lot of the things he said was going to be the opposite. And so I was sort of paying attention to different comments. And there was one person that commented that just sort of on the complete opposite end of the spiritual spectrum from him. And their response was not like how he was wrong to argue with him, but to say like, you use this phrase and I've never heard it in spirituality and it really resonated with me. Can you tell me more about that? And so there's this real posture of learning and love and support there that I don't see other places. Like even when there are disagreements, we've got a politics channel. Like even when there's disagreements there, it's not like the discourse everywhere else. And so it very much feels like the church community I've always wanted to be a part of. So that's the thing that really feels like the community part of what you experience in church. It's on Discord, which is text-based. And then people were asking for, they called it a book study, but basically I teach about the Bible and we discuss it on there. That turned into the podcast, which is called Unbelief. And we do interviews and I do teaching, and it's twice a week, but it's sort of like the deeper content. So like you might experience in a pastor Bible study or a sermon maybe. And then we also do live streams, and live streams are public, and I'll do things like a modified Ash Wednesday ritual on Ash Wednesday. And that, we had like 500 people do that. Like, it's really, those live streams are really interesting. And they, most of them follow roughly a typical model, but it looks very different in that there's teaching, there's an invitation to community, because I talk about Not Church in all of them, and there's usually Q&A involved, so there's interaction there. So that is my community. Also, there's a lot of religious trauma around people being manipulated out of their money. So we don't accept donations. We're using a creator economy funding model, which as far as I can tell, no other religious community is doing right now, which is good and bad because it's innovative. But like every time we do something, nobody's ever
Right.
done it. But it's pay for what you get. So Not Church is a subscription-based thing. We have revenue from TikTok creator funds and things like that. There's also always a way to do whatever it is for free because we're not going to be part of like the systemic injustice of capitalism that preferences people with expendable income for spiritual community. That was a very long answer to that very simple question. I'm sorry.
No, it was a good answer. I have a lot of other questions that now I want to ask. One of which I'll just start with one.
Sure.
Well, first of all,
I'll try to be more brief in this answer.
Okay. Well, first of all, I appreciated how you said that you're kind of helping folks to come up with beliefs that work for them, and then you came back and you said, by that I mean beliefs and practices.
Yes, I normally say beliefs and practices, right?
Well, one of the things that we have talked about in this class is that faith formation, and I like that term better than like Christian education because
for sure.
that makes us think of Sunday school or Bible study and literally nothing else. But one of the things that we have been talking about is that faith formation is about not only what you know intellectually, but also how your faith and the Spirit's working is shaping who you are as a person, and then also what you do with who you are becoming and with what you know, so that it's not just about a belief or an assent or about something that you know. It's about this like whole person and how they're expressing, practicing their faith. So I really appreciate that you said that. And then as you're talking about this being a spiritual community, I'm thinking about how for many people who are Christian, who have been raised in the church, whether they are kind of alienated from it now or not, still see that like being present in worship is the primary way that we practice our faith. And
that for people who are really traumatized, that for a lot of them is incredibly triggering. Right. The songs, the liturgy, the building itself. Like, you know, people in our community, you know, their family will ask that they go to an Easter service or Christmas Eve service, and we will prepare together, we will process together. But like just walking into this space, like showing up at a church building can be really, really hard.
When you are, and I don't know, you know, if you are also part, if there are also people who are part of your community who are also kind of attending a traditional church alongside.
There are some of those,
But like, what would you say to folks who are serving in more traditional kinds of ministries, who are kind of stuck on the like, but you have to be there in person, you have to be in an embodied way, you have to be practicing your faith together in a community, whereas, you know, the words that you're using, like, you know, this is like, that's profession of faith, is find your beliefs, that, you know, practices, that's living out your faith, spiritual community where people are learning and growing and seeking and supporting each other, like all of those are words that you could use for a traditional church. But it doesn't have that like primary, for many Christians, primary worship embodied practice.
Well, I would say there was a fourth thing, and that is in-person things. And we are venturing into that. We've got our first retreat coming up actually this weekend, where some of us will be in body, you know, with each other. You know, I think that everything that we do, every form of community of communication is mediated in some way, right? Obviously, so my undergrad is in communication studies, and you know, so the more mediated the communication is, the less like nonverbal signals, and the more like confused it can be, and so. So I hear that, but there's nothing that's not mediated, right? And the way, also I my experience of worship is not very communal, right? The model that most people use for worship is very much a top-down model. There are a handful of people who are given voice, and then there is the mass of people who are directed by those people, and some of the things they do together, but it is not community in the sense of people coming to your house and having dinner, right? And so it is a very mediated form of community. There is an enormous amount of important aspects of community that are not present there. And so I feel like the putting the process that has put that at the center has done all kinds of negative effects, including the fact that when I think it was either Barna or Pew did a survey to ask people to describe their last experience of worship. The number one was, I don't know, I don't recall. The second one was boring.
Boring. Yeah,
right?
That's not surprising.
Yeah.
It should be, though.
Yeah. And so like, centering something that is either unmemorable or boring doesn't seem to be a very effective way of, if you go to somebody's house for dinner and it is boring, you don't come back. It's not community. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But theologically, I understand the incarnational nature of it. And I don't want to dismiss that. That is a factor. But when churches have wounded people so much that showing up in person, that the incarnational possibility triggers their trauma, it feels like God would be okay with other ways of being in spiritual community. Yeah.
One of the things that we have been kind of wrestling with is thinking about whether the body of Christ, as it is now, right? Not Christ's actual body, but the body of Christ now that we say, we're all members of the body of Christ, whether that can be online or whether it is necessitated by embodiment in person.
Right.
And I think that's a really hard jump for some people to make.
Well, okay, so I've been being paid to be a professional Christian for 27 years as a pastor. I am here for people. I help them process spirituality and all of that. I am not here as a theologian, and I'm very practical in that. And so, while I think it's important for people to consider that, I have 250,000 hurting people who need a pastor, and several hundred in this not church community, and does it not match a theological model that includes a sort of literal one-for-one taking of the idea of the incarnation of Jesus and putting it here and saying it has to be bodily in a world that has deep digital community happening that was not even in the minds of the people who are writing the Bible? Do I think that's an important theological issue to think about? Yeah, I don't got time for that. I've got hurting people who are asking for spiritual community, and I'm not gonna say no. I'm not gonna invalidate their experience. I'm not gonna invalidate the community by acting like, well, it doesn't meet this one theological litmus test, so I'm sorry, I'm not gonna be your pastor because it doesn't count.
Yeah. Well, you're saying whatever the theological issues other people might have, I don't have them.
Right.
And I also wonder if this is partly because you kind of fell into this, right? You were making TikToks, and all of a sudden you were like, this is like hitting a need, and so I'm going to continue to respond to that.
Yeah. So the genesis of this, I my undergrad's communication, I do freelance communication writing. One of the big denominations asked me to do a piece on TikTok. So I told him I needed a month because I had signed up for TikTok. I'm a super nerd. I signed up for everything right when it comes out. I signed up. It was teenagers doing stupid dances at the time. It wasn't the primary news source for people under 40 like it is now. And so I said I need some time to look at it. So I spent a month paying attention, trying to understand why the New York Times bestselling author had no views, basically, and no followers. And this person I've never heard of had all these followers. Mm-hmm. So my plan was to release 10 pieces of content to test my what I thought I had discovered, and then write my article, get my check, be done. I released one video. I think this is the question. It was either one or two videos, and in a couple of days I had 1,500 followers. 10,000 was really on the very quickly I crossed that mark, and but almost immediately I was getting DMs from people and having conversations with people that are like the conversation you have once a year and you hold on to as a pastor. So I had somebody reach out and say, when I came out to my parents, they told me I was going to hell, and I believed them, but I've been watching your videos and I'm not sure, and I'm wondering how I can get back with God, right? Yeah, so I get that every day.
Yeah.
Many times every day, and comments that are intense, like my kid died 2 years ago. My husband, who was the love of my life, died 2 days ago, and I need to understand how I can still believe in God. That was a comment on a video, right? I get thousands of comments a week, and so like. Yeah, I've lost the plot of your question. I can't remember where we started, but yeah, the genesis of this. So I sort of fell into it, and early on, some people started asking, like, is there a way for us to have regular commenters? Started calling themselves the skeptic pastor community. Is there a way that we could be together to talk more intimately? And I sent a message to my DS. District superintendent in the United Methodist Church, my boss, one of my bosses. And I said, I think in religious Christian institutional terms, unbeknownst to me, the Holy Spirit has been creating a church. And these people are asking for a pastor. Like, I was getting messages like, I need a pastor. I'm never going back to church. You're it. You're welcome. Here's my question. And so they're asking for a pastor, and I think they deserve one. And so, it sort of went down this road. It was continuing to explode. It continues to, and eventually it turned into this fully online, digital, spiritual community.
Okay, well, I can't go into this now because it's not the theme of my day.
Right, no, right.
But there are things that I'm really curious about, like, how do you answer thousands of messages and comments, and do you have time to even read them? And, also, how do you keep your ego in check? Because so many people are like influencer, and that's how they're getting their,
it's a little easy because in those thousands of comments, there's a lot of people who are telling me I'm going to hell. You. Right. And I'm leading people astray. And also, I have children. That's very humbling. But, no, you're not wrong. And I have therapy.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking, we've been talking a lot about identity and how we are shaped by what we see online, and we are also shaping others when they see us online, and there's a lot of pressure to get the likes, get the comments, or in your case too, you're talking about funding your job through this stuff too. So I just think that's complicated and interesting to think about. But I do want to focus on community specifically, because I think one of the things that churches have said kind of in maybe even throughout the church history, is that we can be a community.
Yeah.
We can offer something that other communities don't.
Okay.
Right? We can offer a place to find your beliefs, a place to have your life ritual processes, marking time. In a lot of places in the U.S., it would kind of envision that the church was the center of the community. There's other denominations, so maybe there's several different centers, but it becomes the center of your life. It's where you meet people. It's where your social life happens. It's where you do community service. It's where people pray for you and feed you when you're sick, and it's where you get your baby is baptized and you bury your spouse, and all of that happens in this community. And the church has long said, you can bear a lot of lonely people who are looking for community. The best community is the church. And I am hearing you saying the church has failed at providing what it says it does. So in the end, what is community, and how does your not church slash skeptic pastor, how does that also provide this community that people are looking for, that the church has long said? And I also hear you saying, wait, this is church, right, which I think is really important. But I'm coming from a different kind of skeptical position of folks who are committed to the traditional model of church and haven't seen it done a whole lot of other ways, and are looking for ways that they might branch out. But what's community? What is it that people are looking for? And how is this fulfilling the need in a way that the local in-person church hasn't done? I would not call this church, because I think... Because it's called not church?
Right. I would not call this... I call this a faith community, just because church is an institutional term that has failed at community in many ways.
Okay, and you just said this is church.
No. I'm speaking to, but I don't describe this as church generally.
But you had to get an appointment.
I'm talking to, right. So, like I said, in institutional terms.
Yes, got it.
Right. So, what is community? I think the community is this human need, and so. In that, we need people to help us process, and we find in community that we become better, right? So the tradition of Christianity that I'm trained in is Wesleyanism. So our founding dead white guy, John Wesley, he said, one of the quotes that has really changed my perspective is on everything, is that he knows of no holiness but social holiness. And by social holiness, he's not meaning social justice. He was talking in terms of his small group things called the class meeting. And basically what he was saying is transformation only happens in relationship, or he has only seen that happen in relationship. Yeah. And so there's this human need to grow and to see yourself as becoming a good person, to feel like your life is about more than you. And that happens in community. It doesn't happen in a library by yourself, at least not in my experience. You can learn things, but the real transformation happens in a community. And so I think a community is a place where through relationships we grow and are supported. And I know that the church has said that was the best split, that they were the best at it. They have not been, and I think that there are many other places that do a great job. There's a great book called How We Gather, and it explores all different kinds of community that's happening in non-religious spaces. I do think that religion and spirituality offers something to community that aids all of those pieces, because there is some sort of external power, being force, whatever, that draws you into something bigger and gives perspective and permission to follow something higher. And that fuels the transformation that can happen in community, and is a reason, right? Is a motivating factor when you're talking about supporting people who you might not agree with. You might not even want to be friends with in the other world, but as a human, when they are, like I said, like on the way to the hospital with chest pains, it is not just our human relationship. There's something bigger that is calling us to be more than we might be on our own. And I would say that aspect actually empowers us to do that. Now, in Christian terms, we would say that is the Holy Spirit empowering, and like Wesleyanism, empowering us to strive for perfection. But yeah, I think that's what community is, and I think that's what spiritual community brings to the table that something like CrossFit doesn't.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it sounds like kind of what you're saying is that community is relationship with other people that helps us to grow and change and transform, and that faith community then it also explicitly engages the relationship with the holy, that it's a part of that community as well.
Right. Yeah. And I think you're dead on there.
All right. So one of the things that you just said is that you are potentially in relationship with people who you may not have anything in common with.
Well, yeah, for sure. Which is church.
Right.
Right, too. Church, too, right?
Sort of. This is an argument that I'm kind of creating.
Go ahead.
We'll see. But there is a lot of criticism about digital contexts as a place that only heightens our echo chamber because of the algorithm. Like, I had met you already, and then you came across my TikTok, and I was like, oh, of course, because
right.
Like it makes sense that you would be in my algorithm.
Right.
But there are other people who are not in my algorithm, for which I'm grateful, right?
Yeah,
there are people I don't want to interact with online. And I get to choose that by my content, what I'm viewing, what I'm clicking on, etc.
Right. Yeah.
So there's this idea that digital contexts can't be real community because they're so like self-selecting or whatever. Okay, so but I actually think that the church community isn't that different than that, right?
No, you're 100%
like,
true.
We self-select our denomination, the pastor that we like. If the pastor preaches on something that makes us uncomfortable, we quit going.
Right.
We are with people who look like us, dress like us, talk like us, whatever. I don't know that the church is any less of an echo chamber than online contexts.
Well, and so this, I think, is part of this theological understanding of technology, just as I think the creation narratives in Genesis, they reveal something about God that also reveals something about us, and that God creates humanity in their own image, and I think that's a deep sort of underlying principle in the understanding of what it means to be human. When we create things, we create them in our own image. And so to say that the algorithm somehow is creating echo chambers in some ways that we don't do in other places, that's bullshit for two reasons. Number one, the algorithm is created by humans. And so these things are human things. And the algorithms most of them are optimized for engagement. And so what that means is the data that is shaping your feed is you.
Right.
It is your actions. And, I had a friend who said, TikTok is incredibly good at this, but a friend who said that within 5 minutes, TikTok could tell that they were queer, that they were a vegan, and that they cared about, I can't remember whatever social issue it was. But that was them, right?
Yeah.
And so the algorithm is a product of both human creation and human engagement. And so it echoes what we do, right? If you go to a church that is completely in disagreement with you and you feel like they are bigots and racist, you don't go there. You go to a church that is more in line with who you are. If you sit down in a Sunday school class and the same thing happens, you leave that and you go to a different one. In the same way at work, when you are trying to create friends and relationships, is there a range? Yes, but that range is usually pretty narrow.
Yeah.
And so humans create echo chambers for themselves, and so it is no surprise that they do that online. However, the algorithms are really interesting. I got to meet the guy who, the Facebook core emotion emojis, the heart, all of that. He's a psychological researcher that's consulted with basically every tech company. He created that, and then he found out that they were waiting, and they were using that to weight posts and for engagement, and people responded more to anger, and so that was being used to put more angry posts, which means that it's not exactly an echo chamber, but it is again being driven out of human created values, human created algorithms, and then our individual actions.
Yeah. And you also mentioned that you at least have one person in your Discord community who is, you said, was on the opposite end of spiritual spectrum.
We have like, yeah. It now, maybe not every, but like it feels like almost all spiritual, I'm not talking about Christian, almost all spiritual traditions, spiritual identities and non-identities. We have atheists, we have agnostics, we have, all kinds of people who are engaged in this spiritual community. And so it is a very diverse people. However, it is self-selected. It is people who are interested, in having community and in spirituality. And so, we say that, like, if you're being an asshole, we're going to boot you, and we don't feel bad about it. I say that explicitly almost every time I talk about it. No.
See, that's very interesting.
Because it is part of what I say when I talk about the community. And so if you're coming there. The other thing is, when you talk about me receiving hate online, almost all of it is in the comments, like 99%. I rarely get somebody taking the time to to go from the video, to click to my profile, to DM me, to tell me something hateful. Because in some ways it's a reflex, in some ways I think it's performative. But then the threshold of like a subscription means that like I'm not going to pay money for this, or maybe give money to this horrible heretic.
Yeah. But I also think that what you're seeing, self-selected or not,
there's a selection bias for sure.
But you're also talking about how a community is a group of people who are also in charge of like forming their own cultural identity in that community. So like when someone posts something that would be controversial or could be controversial or could be the opposite of someone else, they actually do make the choice. I'm not going to respond to this person from anger or hatred. I'm going to respond with curiosity, or I'm going to look for connections. And so the community also, like when we talk about faith formation and identity formation, community does a whole lot of that.
Right. And when that's part of what a person who runs a community in some way, pastors who are charged with the care of a church, you shape the community into something that you feel like is healthy, and hopefully not something that is just focused on preferencing the rich donors and not offending them. But I've been in churches where that was the guiding factor. But again, you're shaping that community, and so I really want to protect that dynamic of the community, because I think it's the most healthy. And with our community really focusing on helping you find beliefs and practices that help you do those three things, I think it's it's one of the most important attributes of a community that will be successful in helping you do that.
Cool. I have one last question, which is my very favorite one, which is, what should I have asked and I didn't?
Let's see. I think what you should have asked and you didn't I think there's two things.
Okay.
I think there's how people can learn to do this.
Yeah.
But I think the other question is, like, I have this very unique approach that that can feel to people like, well, I can't do that. And so, like, I need to move on to what's next. And so I think the question you should have asked was, like, how do people do that when they are in just a random local church? I don't think you have to be involved in social media. I think social media is an important, it's a front door kind of thing. So you can be exposed to a larger population of people. But I think what is important is that the digital space allows for a couple of really helpful things that wherever you are could be helpful for your work. Number one is there can be anonymity there, right? People can choose anonymity if they want, and they don't have to. So in a Discord server like we use, people can use their real names or not. They can choose to reveal pieces of who they are or not. And the ability to at least enter into a space anonymously can give you, can take some of the anxiety about exploring and processing things that are really difficult, or maybe that might make you feel really vulnerable with the person who lives right next to you, in a way that, like, really can help people. And that can help people who are part of a faith community, right? Being able to have a space where they can enter into anonymously, even with people that they are around, can be helpful. I think the other thing that's really interesting in this is the asynchronous nature of online, right? So the idea that an enormous amount of the world, but of church, has been built, and the church's idea of what community is and what's required for community has been built on synchronous presence. We have to be in the same place at the same time. And if you are not in the same place at the same time, then you can't experience community, you can't experience relationships. So the problem is that's not feasible. Like, even with Zoom, meaning that, like, oh, I don't have time to drive to church, but we still are talking about being synchronous. We also do some Zoom things as well. But the digital world allows for asynchronous community formation, which means if I work shift work and I'm only available at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. Eastern time, like, I can still engage, I can still respond, I can still have conversations, even though there's not the immediacy, I can still engage with this community. And I think that every church can benefit from that, because the idea of a community having to be built on synchronous engagement limits what that can be for people. The other thing is that limits the number of times that people can engage. So people who are dealing with asynchronous engagement, they can engage in that every day at different times for whatever amount of time they have. These things are broken out into channels. So there's a politics channel, there's a purity culture channel, there's an LGBTQ channel, there's a pets channel, right? That also can be incredibly helpful for community, because if you are coming into a space that is synchronous, that is in person, you are going to engage in whatever happens.
Yeah.
Right? And if you're in a place where you don't have the emotional bandwidth to talk about politics, you might not show up. However, if it's the digital realm allows you to break that out. And so you can go and you can engage in whatever you have bandwidth for.
Dogs, definitely dogs.
Dogs, right? You can do that. And you're still engaging, you're still being with people, you are still developing community. You're just not giving bandwidth to more politics, or you're not giving bandwidth to talking about purity culture and your trauma and engagement with that. And that is really powerful. And I think any organization, particularly religious organizations, can benefit from that kind of engagement. And it doesn't require you to have 250,000 followers. It doesn't require you to post videos every day. That aspect of community can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
The other question you should have asked me is like, how do people learn
how to do
that?
this? Yeah.
And that's difficult because there's not a lot of people doing it, and a lot of people who are doing it, that is their job, and not training other people. My whole career, I was at a conference one time with a guy named Doug Fields, who was like
youth ministry guy,
really important person. But in a Q&A session talking about a number of things, somebody asked him about like, training other people, all that kind of stuff. And he said, really, he feels like it's 10 to 15% more work to take what he does and make it possible for other people to do. And that's been part of who I have been for my whole career. And so as I've been doing this, I've been doing that work as well. And I'm working on people who would intern for field ed type of situation. I've sort of outlined a process of how you respond online and the sort of pastoral underpinning values that you're communicating or acting on. But also, I think launching digital communities. I've also spent a good bit of time developing a cohort model, and have been talking to a couple of annual conferences in the United Methodist Church for saying, let's get 3 or 4 people and let's bring them through this process of launching digital communities that doesn't require somebody to go viral online.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, because one of the best lessons that I learned from my own field education was I had a conversation with my supervising pastor, and I said, this is just really weird. Who am I supposed to be when I'm a pastor? Right. And he was like, well, you're supposed to be you. That's the whole point, right?
Yes.
If God is calling you to this, it's because of who you are. You don't have to pretend to be someone else.
Right.
And that's what you're saying is wherever you are located, you don't have to be me.
Right.
You have to be you.
Exactly.
And you have to learn how to, as you, look for what's going to benefit the folks who might come across you online and the people who you see in person who are also going to see you online. Right.
And that's part of this cohort process. The very beginning is trying to figure out who you are, the uniquenesses of who you are, and what that offers the world and what other communities exist like that. There's a guy named Nathan Webb who has he's one of the other United Methodist fully digital pastors. His his faith community is called Checkpoint Church, and it's a community for nerds, geeks, and gamers.
Is he in North Carolina or something?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, I've heard of him.
So again, right, I think exactly what you're talking about. The very first part of the process is figuring out who you are and what you offer uniquely to the world. For me, it was being a skeptic and a pastor at the same time. Mm-hmm. But everybody is different. And that's part of the process.
Yeah, that's great. Jeremy, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you, folks, for paying attention. And I will see you online on our discussion boards. And Jeremy, I will see you, I don't know, probably in Indianapolis with some Lily thing.
Yeah. Well, we're going to be
we'll be at Progressive Youth Ministry.
Yes.
I'll see you in Austin.
That's it. That's the podcast. Shout out to the Choir Network, to Patheos, to Matthew and Keith, who make everything happen. Now, get out of here. Go do something to make the world a better place. Okay? We'll see you next time.